Well, I would like, yes, to start maybe by, and it is a direct answer to your question, by the way, by trying for us together to explain what are we talking about when we talk about the authoritarian countries. Because there is a certain tendency to, put aside Russia, Belarus, like kind of obviously authoritarian countries, and treat countries such as my own or Hungary as something different, and they are not. And this is what I want to explain here. In my country concretely, for almost 10 years, we do not have media freedom. Practically, not practically, but all television stations with a national frequency are controlled by the government and by the president himself. Only, less than 10% of the share is held by independent television stations that are basically on cable only. And in Serbia, still majority of the people get their information, through the public service, through the TVs with national frequency, and this is what shapes their minds about what we were talking about. The second thing is we refer to these regimes as competitive authoritarianisms. This is one of the terms used, but they're not competitive. Serbia is not competitive since December last year. In December last year, the ruling party bussed tens of thousands of people from Bosnia and Herzegovina to vote in Belgrade elections and in other elections. And I took this publication because I think you had this in 2014 in this country. So it's just, I think, yes, been there, done that. I think that maybe you would beg to differ, but I think in my country it was done on steroids in comparison to 2014 here, but I might be wrong on that one. Lastly, since August, this year, but if not before, we do not have, or at least the freedom of assembly is threatened in a serious manner. And I think these things then come together because how we look at these particular type of regimes that we sometimes call competitive authoritarianisms, hybrid regimes, they're not separate types of regimes. They're just in a process that is going towards complete authoritarianism, and you can stop it with a snap. Now, on media literacy, the ambassador mentioned something that about Serbia. I think that's an interesting case. Actually, it is not Russia to blame for the way in which Serbian people think about the world, their own country, relations with other countries in the region. Their minds are shaped by the media machine of the ruling party in Serbia. So and why am I underlying this? You may call the ruling party in Serbia useful idiots. We talked about it before, but I think it's deeper than that. This distinction needs to be made because our president was just received by the German chancellor as a legitimate partner in Germany because, yes, we do have lithium that everybody wants, and then our competitive authoritarianism is considered, well, kind of they're acceptable. So I think this is a big problem that we have right now, and maybe I want to mention a research that is really interesting that actually explains this, what I'm saying, that it is the Serbian machine, media machine, that actually shapes hearts and minds of the people when they think about the war in Ukraine, because this is what we discussed. Basically, in 2022, Open Society Foundations and UK-based organization Data Praxis. They did a big global public opinion survey in numerous countries of the world. I think that there were more than 20 countries, and Serbia was amongst them. They didn't publish the data on the war in Ukraine and Serbia in particular in their own publication, but we were given, my think tank, access to the raw data of this research, so we published in cooperation with them a separate type of research, separate publication called Beyond Sputnik and RT. And this explains this, that Serbia is a global outlier in pro-Russian narratives. And so, for example, responding to the question, who do citizens think is responsible for the beginning of the war in Ukraine? And the options offered were Ukraine, Russia, the West, and I don't know. Well, 63% of Serbs think it's the West. Not many. Well, here as well, same, and I think probably because you are enormous consumers of TV Happy, TV Pink from Serbia, and you know, probably there are other reasons, but I think this is a very important reason why this is so in Macedonia as well. So this is one thing, and there are other countries of the global south that come close to this, like Senegal 52, Indonesia 50, but no one was as much as Serbia. But now, interestingly, an answer to another question, which is, should Ukraine, how does the war, I'm paraphrasing, but how does the war in Ukraine end? And there were several statements offered. One of them was Ukraine should give part of its territory that Russia currently controls, so, you know, to have a ceasefire and peace talks and so on. The other one was that Russia should withdraw from all territories that it occupied. And interestingly, on average, when you look at the global south, that on the first question was weaker than Serbia, but, you know, kind of there. 57% of the global south do not agree with the statement that Russia should leave all the territories of Ukraine. In Serbia, not. Only 12% agree. So why is this? Like, you cannot say that there is more Russian propaganda in Serbia than in Moldova, for example, because Moldova in this research was not agreeing their citizens with this statement by and far. And interestingly, we also, well, at least a majority of the Serbs think that parts of our territory were taken in the past as well. You know, so how this paradoxical result here that they think that, you know, it's okay to take Ukrainian territory but not theirs. And this is something that we have been talking, it's not about the truth. It's about emotions. And why Serbs are pro-Russian? It's not because they know anything about Russia or that they really like Russia. They like Russia not because of what it is, but because of what it is not. And it is not the West. And I think this is the point of departure. And this explains why the lady was, you know, that you mentioned, was talking like that. It's not here, it's here. And the question is, how do we get to here? How do we get to change that? You know, this is a big puzzle, but I don't know to what extent are you following the situation in Serbia. We have a huge mobilization of students currently, and I think, you know, they're managing, yes, I think they're managing quite well to do that actually right now. You know, to address power in a way that politicians and maybe traditional civil society that we haven't been able to until now. You know, so, you know, but I can stop there for now because I don't know if there is Erwin as well to speak. So.
Well, I was just wondering, If you can, before Mr. Fuera enters the room via digital tunnel, whether you can explain to us a little bit more on references how Ukraine and the question of Ukraine and intervention within the Ukraine and intervention in NATO and the question of Kosovo on the emotional level is explained between regular people in Serbia. So
Yes.
because we often hear, you see what they did to Serbia, now you will see what will happen to Ukraine. Let me be vulgar, but
Yes.
this is the question that
Well,
we have to address.
I think they don't really. There is a TV channel that I mentioned, TV Happy, which is really the most egregious example of pro-Russian propaganda. They even air Pervi Canal like live, and then they have subtitles and stuff like that. So it's not viewed so much. So I have access to the shares from time to time with our media partners. We can see it, the share of certain programs. I think it's more not knowing about what's going on and not caring, probably, which, it's not only in Serbia, let's face it. I mean, it's across Europe, as the war goes on, people are like kind of, looking the other way. So there is that. I think being exposed to people from Ukraine, being able to go, changes your views enormously, I think. And obviously, it's not many people will go to Ukraine for obvious reasons, because I did, but most Serbs wouldn't, and you wouldn't blame them for that, right? Ukrainians didn't come to Serbia much when we had wars and stuff. So, but I think it's about being exposed to the reality. When I was in Ukraine last year, I wrote a reportage about it from a human point of view, and it did have an impact, I think, of the readers of the newspaper that, I wrote for. But in general, the problem is that our government is having this duplicitous game, On the one hand, they spread this pro-Russian, anti-Western propaganda. When, for example, the First Lady of Ukraine came to Serbia with Kuleba, the foreign minister, this visit went almost completely unnoticed in the media under the control of the government. Usually, when foreign dignitaries come to Serbia, and this is one of the things that our current president introduced, their flags from the airport to the city center of both countries. Well, guess which country didn't get its flag? It's Ukraine. So while the president is abroad, he brags about selling ammunition to Ukraine, which is good, There is a dark side of it because it fuels an enormous corruptive machine within the country, and whistleblowers from Serbia, investigative journalists, wrote about that. But obviously, in geopolitical terms, like lithium is something that buys him favors in the West. So there is this side, but he doesn't talk too much about it in Serbian media. And why? And I would.
So you are saying he is a clever populist?
He is an authoritarian guy that is authoritarian as much as he can within the circumstances that he is in. We should not forget we're a candidate country for EU membership. So, if nothing else, they see in Belgrade the regime, EU as a cash cow. They need the money from the EU. So I think there are limits to the authoritarianism, but increasingly less so. I think many red lines have been broken this year. Yeah, but maybe I could quote another research from 2021, December of BIEPAG, because you mentioned this other affiliation of mine. So we did a survey of the geopolitical views of the citizens of the Western Balkans countries. And in Serbia, it's interesting when you cross the political affiliation of the citizens and their geopolitical preferences, you see that by and large the ruling party voters are pro-Russian and pro-Chinese, so pro-authoritarian in that way. So why they do this as well, why they don't display Ukrainian flags and that, it's also because of internal political reasons. So they're kind of, it's, like this tail wagging the dog scenario where, they create a narrative that like bounds them in a certain, limits their actions. So I don't